Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of CCI Cast. This is a special episode where we're actually celebrating the 100th volume of CCI. And we have with us special guests today. Of course, the current editor-in-chief, Dr. Stephen Bailey, but also the founder of the journal, Dr. Frank Hildner, and the next editor-in-chief, Dr. Chris White. All of them don't need really an introduction, but I'm going to start with Dr. Hildner. If you can tell us, how this started and how you started the journal, the inception, and the story of CCI.
This is a good story. Not that it's worth anything, but it'll make you happy, I think. It all started one Saturday morning when I was making rounds in the hospital. And the telephone call came in through the hospital saying, we need a doctor. So I answered, and the person that needed the doctor was a man with an acute heart attack in Fort St. Thomas. And he was there. To make a long story short, I had to catch a plane. Eastern Airline made a place for me. I flew to St. Thomas. I got off the plane. People that were supposed to meet me didn't meet me, so I just took a cab or something, ran up to the hospital, and I found this patient with a heart rate of 28 and who needed a pacemaker. So I happened to I knew that, and so I put a sterile pacemaker and all that kind of stuff ready to go in my pocket on the plane. And so when I got off the plane, I was ready to put in a temporary pacemaker, which I did. I walked up to the patient. Here he was talking and all that, but I put in the temporary pacemaker just by the looks and other words. There was no x-rays around to be used. To make a long story short, that patient was the owner of a publishing house in New York. His secretary is the one who got me interested in publishing or starting a new journal. And one thing or another, and we ended up with the journal Catheterization and Cardiovascular Diagnosis. And eventually we lucked out in that journal became a part of the Society for Cardiac Angiography. Now we've gone through several different names about the society and about this journal. And so when we get up to 100th issue like we are now, we're saying we did a good job and that we did it all the way from 0 to 100. There you go.
So one of the points, Dr. Hildner, I think is important is that not only were you publishing manuscripts with research, but you decided early on to publish case reports. And that was a period of time where they were not very valuable in terms of publishing, but yet for the society and the ability to help interventionalists communicate quickly and to disseminate information, they really played a significant role. So you might comment on that.
I think you're 120% correct. I started the journal with the idea that with circulation, heart, and with all the other clinical cardiology journals we didn't have anybody doing diagnostic stuff like with catheters and so on. So that's what started me off on the whole thing. And we started having papers. We put the notice out. We are starting a new journal. And of course, the VIPs that I sent a letter to, there's about 50 of them. And about half of them responded saying, I wouldn't want to look at a newer journal at all. I'm tired of new journals. On the other hand, the other half, 25, said this is a great idea. And so we went ahead and we started the journal. Now, we didn't have the society yet, but we just had the journal and we started producing it. And let me show you, if I can get this on TV, the first. There we go.
Wow.
That is the cover of the first journal. And since that time, we've had the name of the journal changed 2 or 3 times, catheterization and cardiovascular interventions and all that and so forth. I'm going to leave you determine what you want. But this was the original one. And now we have several others. And originally, we were not associated with the society, but eventually that came about, and we eventually became an official journal of the society. Okay, here you go.
Well, you've encapsulated 25 years of loving devotion to the journal that you provided.
Yes.
In just a few minutes.
Yes.
I think at this time, I'd like to go ahead and transition and ask Chris White, who was the second editor-in-chief, for just some remembrances that he has of his tenure.
Thanks, Steve. I'll tell you what stands out is that when we began in 2000, Frank and his wife were so helpful to us, right? And you can see why Frank is so committed.
Wait a second. I want you to see somebody over here.
Oh, hi, sweetie.
Hi, Chris.
Hey, wherever I am, she is. Okay.
So this journal got transferred from Frank in Florida to New Orleans, and it was a paper journal. Everything were in folders. They drove across, brought a bunch of file cabinets and folders, and hung out with us for a while we got to just to make sure it was a smooth launch. You can't imagine today, someone giving you that much time to make sure that you could start land on your feet, because Frank knew everything about this journal, and he was able to fill in so much for me. And the other thing I think that really helped at the time is that I was really committed to the tradition of the journal. I had no intention of doing anything that was going to be radically different than what had been done. I wanted to carry on what Frank was doing and maybe accelerate it. To your point, Steve, we doubled down on case reports. We didn't call them case reports. We called them technical advancements, right? We were going so fast. People would develop a new technique. They would develop a new way to do something. We didn't want them to wait to do 100 patients to do a study. We wanted to know after 2 or 3 patients, this was a faster way to go. I mean, interventions was, launching rapidly in the late 90s. We took over in 2000. We also, that was the name change. We went from diagnosis to interventions because we were now dominantly doing, I think we added first interventions. It was diagnosis and interventions for a while, and then interventions. Within the first, 2 or 3 years, we then transitioned to electronic, which led us to invite reviewers more quickly, let us move more quickly through. I don't know how much influence I had on the endo part. I think endo was blooming among the field, and so we were certainly receptive to having a section on endovascular therapy at the time. And I was always so proud that we didn't give a rat's behind about the impact factor, right? I mean, who cared about the impact factor? We were every year the most valuable piece of the societal membership, right? When you would poll the society about why do I pay my dues, why do I belong to SCI, it was always CCI. And as long as CCI could bring that much value to the membership, that was our goal. And we wanted people to open the pages and improve their practice. There were plenty of other journals exploding that could talk about science, but there were very few journals that you could take it for 20 minutes and figure out a new way to do something in cath lab. So that was our overarching concern.
Well, so I guess we could sort of think about you as the tweet and TikTok of that era, right? Because you were as rapidly as possible disseminating those changes and advances in the field.
Yes.
You know, you contributed a lot in many other ways. The involvement of editorials was something that you really wanted to reach out and include our community in commenting upon these cases. And it's fun to have seen that spread now to so many other journals. But as I recall at the time,
Yes.
that was something that you were passionate about as well.
It's interesting. It was not easy to do because I insisted on the faculty member writing the editorial, and you know, there was a lot of desire to have a junior person sort of develop and write the editorial. And my point was, you know, this was truly peer-to-peer. Somebody had written and submitted this thing, and I didn't think it was respectful actually to have a junior review it. I wanted, if we were going to be critical or positive, I wanted that to be from a full-fledged faculty member and a peer. And so we held pretty tight to that requirement. I think it made the editorials a lot better. I don't know, you like me always read the editorials first so that I can put the paper in perspective. And so the better the editorial, the better I was able to read the paper.
Yeah, no, I think that's a comment from a number of our following, is that rather than reading an abstract, they'll read the editorial and be able to be better informed when they go ahead and read that manuscript.
Right.
So the transition to myself was now over 11 years. And I think that like you, Chris, I wanted to remain true to the spirit of catheterization and catheterization cardiovascular interventions. And I think that we've carried forward what Frank started. I think it serves a unique opportunity for us with all the journals that are out there in terms of our being committed to the field. I think it remains one of the most widely read journals. I think we're all proud of that in terms of CCI. You know, and we've undergone some changes. We heard from Frank that the journal started before its relationship with Sky, and recently the relationship with Sky has changed. But the journal continues, and we're incredibly proud of continuing with the tradition, with the content that we have, and the impact we're having, not in terms of a factor, but the impact that we have on the practice of interventional cardiology each day, and helping all of us be better at our interventions and our interactions.
Well, Steve, I will just tell you that, you know, Frank started this in a relative vacuum. There was very little competition for cath lab oriented work. And he mentioned he sent emails to 50 guys or people. And, you know, back in that day, there were probably 50 or 60 guys that were, you know, doing any volume of cath work. During my time, interventions bloomed, and we became a real cath lab director's place where people who were really committed to cath lab time paid attention to the journal. You, on the other hand, inherited a journal that was in an unprecedented expansion of medical journals. And not only medical journals, but so many cath lab interventional journals were going after the space. And frankly, none of them ever understood the practice impact that CCI has on people. They all wanted to focus on science and were not very interested in skills and techniques and how to do things better and faster and safer.
Well, we illustrate some of the older generation. Let me pause and Mirvat, bring you to the forefront here and allow you to ask what questions you might have of our panel.
Well, you know, firstly, congratulations, because the journal really has evolved tremendously, and, you know, going from coronaries to structural to endovascular, and it's covering the entire scope. But not just covering the entire scope in terms of the field of cardiovascular interventions, it's also a wide scope where here I am, a practitioner all the way from the other end of the globe, part of your team. So now your authors, your writers, those who contribute to CCI, as well as the readers, are across the globe. So how is it that you're able to retain this readership and be involved and engage everybody and very inclusive?
Well, I certainly, speaking from where we're at today, it really followed, again, the path that Frank and Chris had started. Frank, as Chris pointed out, I think it must have involved everybody that was in the cath lab at the time, because it wasn't a large group of people. It was the beginning of catheterization. And so much was happening. With Chris's expansion, there were a couple of regions that were dominant, right? The United States, a few areas in Europe, but the rest of the world really was not involved in that decade of progress. But by the time that I'd taken over, we were now seeing this expanded to so many areas, and areas that face different challenges. That, how we performed our procedures in the US or Western Europe were completely different, and the populations that were involved. But as we began to be involved with South America and Central America, Asia's, Australia, it became, very clear that how they approached patients, how they approached procedures, what they were allowed to do was completely different than how we had faced this before. And so it's clear that interventions are global, patient care is global, and so that became the challenge to reach out and globalize that. And I'm really proud of folks like yourself, the other members of our editorial board, and our associate editor team, in terms of what we bring to diversity. And, we were being diverse before it became cool to be diverse, right? I mean, this was something that as interventionalists, we were already doing and representing in our communities. So thank you for those kind words, and we're excited about how the growth is continuing.
Good.
Well, I appreciate your spending time. I think our time is about up. Dr. Alasnag, do you have, you want to go ahead and wrap up our session?
Well, thank you all for being here and giving us, a historic background of the journal. And we're excited to see where the journal continues to head. I'm sure there's a lot more for us to expect from CCI. And so I'll just tell our viewers that stay with us. We're going to unroll a series of episodes during July to celebrate the 100th volume. And we're going to dive into some of our articles that were published in CCI over the course of the year. So we hope you enjoy it, and they will cover structural, coronary, physiology, and imaging, and of course, radio.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, everybody.
I appreciate it. Nice job.
Take care. Bye.
It's not often you get to hear the dinosaurs explained how the dinosaurs came about.
It was interesting. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah, our version of Jurassic Park.
There you go. Bye-bye. Good to see you, Frank.
Bye-bye.
Good to see you.